All right, I think we're live. I think we're good. Whew. All right. I don't know where to start. Maybe I should just start right at the beginning. I must say, I'm already freaked out by sitting right where I'm at. I'm a little nervous, I'm not gonna lie, because this room is where it all began. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound very unbelievable. It is up to you to decide if it's real or if everything I'm telling you was just my imagination. That is up to you to decide. I grew up in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, but my parents would spend the summer here in Island Heights, New Jersey. Island Heights is a small Victorian town right on the water. It is beautiful. It's New Jersey's hidden little gem. Every time I mention Island Heights to anybody, even people that live in New Jersey, they always ask the same question: where the heck is that? And I think that's how Island Heights wants it. It's known for its sailing and beautiful views. I can't imagine that anyone wouldn't want to live here. But with this old town comes a lot of old history. And I'm convinced that my parents bought one of the most haunted houses in this town. My mom was a school teacher, so she always had summers off just like us. So after school ended, my parents would pack my brother and I up, and we would head to the Jersey Shore. And this was our beach house. My brother and I were in the local sailing program, so we were always busy during the summer. Right when school ended, we were thrown right into sailing school. It was a great life, I'm not gonna lie. It was pretty sweet. At the time, I didn't really appreciate it, but now looking back, it was pretty awesome. No cell phones, no internet, just being kids. When I was around 9 years old is when things started to get a little weird. I would wake up every morning around 2 or 3 o'clock, and I would see a figure standing at the edge of my bed. Now, this figure looked like he was really tall. He had broad shoulders and a bald head. And what I could see was a silhouette of his body, and it was dark. It was like a shadow. You could see through it too. And always when I woke up, I was like, maybe I'm just having a bad dream, or maybe I'm just seeing things. Maybe it's just the shadows that are reflecting from the windows. But it always had me wondering every single night, and it kind of freaked me out. I don't know how I went back to sleep, but I did. So one day I told my friends Mark and Ryan about it, and I got my brother involved too. And Mark said, hey, I got a Ouija board. Maybe we should play the Ouija board in your scary looking barn and ask it some questions. I said, why the heck not? So the first question we asked, is somebody there? Yes. It moved pretty quick to the yes. Okay, that was a little freaky. We were like, was somebody moving that? Let's ask another question. Okay, what's your name? And it said Fred. Fred. Okay, it's got a name. Did you die in this house? Yes. We asked it a bunch of other questions. We asked, were you murdered? He said yes. When did you die? I think he said late 1800s, early 1900s. But we started to get a little freaked out and we stopped. After that is when a lot of weird things started happening. And now looking back, I think we opened up a portal. Or we invited that spirit to rain all hell on us. After that, I would still wake up in the middle of the night, 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. I would still see this figure at the edge of my bed. Shortly after that incident, I had a sleepover with Mark and my other friend Winston. My brother was there too, of course. We all decided to camp out downstairs in the living room. It was a big enough a space, and we laid out all of our sleeping bags, and it was right next to the bathroom. So if we had to get up, we wouldn't wake up my parents. I remember being woken up around 3 o'clock in the morning, and Mark is really scared, and he says, hey, there's someone at the back door. I said, what? He said, yes, there's somebody at the back door looking inside. I was like, you're lying, man. He's like, yes, I was just at the bathroom. And I remember looking through the bathroom and out the back door, and all of a sudden, I saw this huge person, broad shoulders, bald head. It was like a silhouette figure, and he was peering inside of the back door. And I was like, holy there's someone outside. I'm gonna go and tell mom. We all saw it. All 4 of us saw it. So I remember I ran to the front of the house because that's where the steps are. And I was gonna run up and tell my mom there's somebody trying to get into the house. Now this is the 90s. There was a lot of people being kidnapped back then and you would go missing. So we thought this person was trying to break in the house and kidnap us. We're kids, we don't know. So by the time I ran to the front door, that same figure was on my front porch looking in the window. And you have to walk by this window and the front door to get up the steps. And I was like, oh, so I ran back to my friends and I said, yo, we're surrounded right now. They're at the front door. We're like, that's impossible. There's no way that person in the back door could have teleported to the front in that quick of a time. And maybe there was 2 of them. We thought it was Bigfoot. We didn't know what to think. And we just said, we're surrounded, let's just stay put. The next morning, we told our parents. My dad was like, you're crazy, go back to bed. Like, you didn't see that. And he was very skeptical about it all, I remember. But my mom was like, that's kind of creepy. She started to catch on to the things I was telling her. During this time, I would still be waking up and I would see that figure on the edge of my bed, standing there looking at me. And there was one night that I just got fed up and I was like, I'm tired of this. So I stood up and I remember taking a swipe at it. The minute I took a swipe at it, it hovered above me and just floated and kind of just looked down on me. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this. And I got up and ran out of the room. In fact, I ran out of this room where I'm telling the story. And that's why I chose this room to tell the story, because like I said, this is where it all began. And that figure was standing right here, looking at me. Very creepy. I mean, you could probably see the goosebumps on my arm right now. All right, I'm getting a little freaked out. So there was just a lot of crazy incidents from there on out. I remember looking out this window behind me, out in the back shed, towards the back shed barn area, and I would see somebody standing in the barn, kind of like peering out the window. Same figure. Tall person, broad shoulders, bald head. It seems like that was a reoccurring figure every time I saw this thing, whatever it is that I saw. After I took the swipe at the object in this room and it hovered above me, I never came back to this room. I never slept in my room ever again. This was my room. After that incident, I must have been 9. This was shortly after I played the Ouija board. I never came back to this room. I stayed in my parents' room until I was 12. I slept on the floor. So I spent the entire summer on a wooden floor in a sleeping bag. And I remember my dad was pretty pissed that I moved into the room and I was too afraid to go sleep in my room. So he said, screw it, I'm just gonna go sleep in here. I'm like, cool, I'll just sleep in mom's room on the floor. I did it for years. Then that's when some weird things started happening to my dad. He would come down here on the off season when we were in school. He had to check up on the house at least once a month, make sure the yard work was done and make sure nothing was leaking or anything like that. So he would come down to the beach house all by himself. And that's when weird things started happening to him. He said one night he heard his name being called out and he woke up and he's like, someone yelled, Paul, wake up. Another night the covers were ripped off of him. Just a lot of weird stories. And he always told me, like, don't tell your mom, but this is what happened to me. Okay, moving forward with my life. The times I spent my summers here, I would always hear my mom call my name, Steven, Steven. I would run upstairs and I would say, hey, what's up? You call my name? She was like, no, I didn't call your name. Weird things like that would happen to me. You would always hear footsteps. You would hear loud bangs, but you never know if it was your senses just playing tricks on you. So fast forward to high school. Now it's the era of your girlfriends. And when your girlfriend finds out that you have a beach house, she definitely wants to come down and experience it. Cool, that's great. You can go ahead and sleep in the guest room. I was not going to be sleeping in this room. So I remember bringing my girlfriend at the time here, and I told her, hey, you can go ahead and take this room. It's my dad's room. He's not here, obviously. I will sleep in my brother's room. And she was like, okay, yeah, sure, that's fine. But deep down, I knew there was no way in heck that I was going to stay in this room. I remember she went to sleep and within an hour, she was on top of me, waking me up. She was like, wake up. What's going on with that room? Like just saying all this stuff. I was like, what? I was like, calm down. She's like, this. I just wasn't really understanding her. She woke me up. I was like, you need to go back to bed because you're going to wake up my mom and we can't be together. So I sent her back in this room. The next morning, she would not talk to me until I think like lunchtime. And I was like, okay, what happened last night? Tell me what's wrong. You woke me up. And she's like, yeah, you sent me back in that room. And I was like, okay, big deal. The reason she said she came into my room was because she said the bed started shaking. And I was like, that's really weird. And she said she kind of felt very weird, like somebody was watching her. It's something spooked her big time. But then I sent her back. And that's where something really, really unexplained happened. She said she got back in bed and the entire bed started shaking and she tried to get up and run back into my room, but she couldn't. She was paralyzed. It was at that point that she started to levitate, she said, right here, over the bed. I don't know what happened after that. Look at that. Look at those goosebumps. To this day, that story freaks me out. I don't know what happened. Maybe I can get in touch with her again so she can explain what happened to her again. I haven't talked to her in, I don't know, 15 years, but I would really like to hear that story again. The next story goes along with the same girl I dated with in high school. Me and her were about to go down to the bay and kayak, or I think we were going to just go for a walk. I'm pretty sure we were going to go kayaking because I was driving down there. And I saw this guy staring at my parents' house, just in the middle of the road, just looking at the house. And I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he said, "Hey, you live here?" I was like, "Yeah, my parents bought it back in 1990. He's like, "Oh, I used to live here too." I was like, "Oh, you were one of the three brothers. I heard about you guys." And I said, "I gotta ask you, man, because I've always wanted to ask the previous people who lived here the same question. Have you ever seen anything in this house?" I was like, "Have you ever seen anything, heard anything?" And he's like, kind of leans into my window and he says, "Dude, I slept up on the 3rd floor with my brothers. You better believe it." I was like, "Tall guy, broad shoulders, bald head?" He's like, "That's the one." And I was shocked. Now, did I lead him on to believe exactly what I saw by describing him? I don't know. But he seemed pretty convinced that I saw the same exact thing. Another weird story with that happened a couple years ago when my parents were having a garage sale. And a guy was just looking around, but I think he just wanted to be there just to talk. And he said, "Hey, I used to play here as a kid." And he was looking at the bathroom. He's like, "You're not going to believe this, but when I went to the bathroom once, when I was hanging out with the 3 brothers, I walked in the bathroom and there was a lady in the tub." And he said it freaked him out so bad he ran out of the house. And it's funny because he said that lady was wearing very old, like Victorian clothes. And one day I remember as a kid, my mom called me, so I ran upstairs. And like I said before, you have to pass the front porch, the front door, when you go up the steps. And I looked out the window and I saw this lady in black and white in old Victorian clothes looking out towards the bay, the water. And I did a double take real quick and then poof, she was gone. Those are like the weird little stories that happened in and out of me growing up here. But going back to my high school days, this next story is really freaky as well. My brother and his girlfriend came down here by themselves one weekend. And it wasn't until they were packing up to leave back to Pennsylvania, because we could only spend the weekends here when we came down in high school, because we had school, or my parents didn't want us to stay here for long periods of time. I wonder why. But anyway, my brother Matt and his girlfriend were ready to leave the house. His girlfriend came into this room, and this is where they kept all their bags and whatnot. And she saw my brother leave the room and go downstairs. And she said, "Hey, honey, can you help me pack up?" And he didn't say anything. He just walked downstairs. So she followed him downstairs, and he wasn't there. She's like, "Well, maybe he went outside. Let me go finish packing up." When she came back up the steps, she walked past my brother's room, because you have to walk past my brother's room to come to this room. He was still sleeping in bed. He never moved. So she woke him up and freaked out and said, "Did you just go downstairs?" "No, you just woke me up." She told him what happened. They packed their bags and they got the hell out of the house. Ugh, it's been a lot. I know. A lot of things happened in this house. I'm freaked out telling this story, especially where I'm at. But I have to continue. I have to get this story out there. The next story is one that is clear as day. And I'll end this story on this note. One day after high school, this must have been 2007, my buddy Mike Burke and I decided to come down here and spend the weekend, have a good time. My parents were really cool with us coming down for the weekend. It was a great way to stay safe and to stay out of trouble, if you will. But I remember we were going to have some drinks that night. And as we were getting set up, we were sitting in the den, or the family room. My parents always called it the den. And we heard a noise. And we looked up. And this is the most clear image I saw out of this entire experience. We saw, it had to be a ghost. We saw a guy float, not in the kitchen, but if you look through the kitchen, there's a doorway. He floated across, and it looked like he was going towards the bathroom. Like if you were just looking at a doorway and you just saw something go right by you. But it felt like time stopped because I saw every intricate detail of his face and his body. I'll never forget that. And so it looked like your typical ghost. First off, you guessed it. The features of him were, he had very broad shoulders, long shoulders. He was tall and he was floating. He had a bald head. And I remember his jaw being dropped like that. And in his cheek was a hole with like a dangly piece of flesh, kind of like just holding it all together, kind of like a dangly tooth. And you could see right through him. He looked milky. He looked like a typical ghost. And his arms were out like this, just floating across that doorway. and it looked like he was just wearing rags, bald head, broad shoulders. You can kind of see through him, but he was black and white. It was so clear that Burke jumped up out of the seat and said, "What the was that?" and ran out the door. He ran out the door and down the street. I stood up and I went after the ghost because I was like, no, you're not getting away. You have tormented me my entire life. I need to get some proof. I need to talk with you. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and have a conversation with you. I went after him, and he looked like he went towards the bathroom, but obviously when I got there, he was gone. So I had to walk down the street and find Burke next and try to convince him to come back into the house. It took me a little bit. It took me about a half hour. He eventually came back in the house, but he was very freaked out. He was very upset. And I always told my friends this house was haunted, and I think that day Burke believed me. Everything I told you is things that I experienced and things that I saw throughout my life. I don't talk a lot about it because I think people will just think I'm crazy. But if you made it this far in this video, thank you for watching. And please, if you have experienced something like this, or if you have any questions about the story, please let me know in the comments below. And please let me know your experience if you have ever had one just like this. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Do you remember when you called me and you said you found the deed to the house? Whose name did you find on that deed?
It was Frederick. It was like a Frederick Eckler, something like that. But that's not who I bought it from. That's who Bernie DeRosa. I bought it from Bernie and Lynn DeRosa. He showed us through the house, and you were just like 2 years old. Matt was 3 years old or something. And I looked at the house, and he said the house was haunted. I really didn't want to pay attention to it.